For 27 years, my husband sent money to a woman he called his sister every single month. No matter how tight things got, no matter how many times I said, let's save for our retirement, that envelope, that quiet brown envelope, always left our house before the 10th of every month. He said it was for the family, and I believed him, because that's what wives do when they love deeply. They believe. You know, sometimes it's not the loud betrayals that destroy you, it's the quiet, consistent lies that slip into your life disguised as kindness. They sit beside you at dinner, smile at you from across the table, and tell you they're just helping their sister. And for almost 3 decades, I thought I was married to a good man. We built a life together, small, humble, but full of laughter. We raised 2 children. We planted a garden behind our house, one that still blooms with roses every spring. He'd call me his anchor, his steady hand. I didn't realize that while I was holding the ship steady, he was steering it toward another shore entirely. The first few years, I didn't think much about it. Everyone has a family they support, right? Maybe a sister who fell on hard times, maybe someone who needed a little extra. But after a while, little things started feeling off. He never mentioned her name, just my sister. He never called her in front of me, not even once. And every time I asked how she was doing, he'd change the subject, as if her life existed in a world separate from ours. I still remember the night I asked, "What's her name again?" He looked at me, just for a second, and then smiled that easy, charming smile he always wore. "You know her name, darling. I've told you before." But he hadn't. I knew he hadn't. And yet I laughed it off, because when you love someone for so long, you start explaining away the discomfort. You start believing that confusion is your fault. It's strange how blind love can make you, even when your instincts whisper that something isn't right. 27 years. That's how long I lived beside a secret. That's how long I slept beside a man who had another life neatly hidden beneath the folds of ordinary days. I didn't find out until one evening when a letter came in the mail addressed not to me, not even to us, but to him. It wasn't from a bank or a bill collector or anyone I recognized. It was from her. And the way my hands trembled opening that letter, the way my heart pounded as I read those words, I knew, before I even finished the first line, that my life was about to split into 2, before and after. But before I tell you what I found, I want to take you back to the beginning, because every betrayal has roots. It doesn't just appear overnight. It grows quietly in the spaces where trust goes unguarded. And mine started in the simplest way, with a husband I trusted, a story I believed, and a sister that didn't exist the way I thought she did. You know, sometimes it's not the loud betrayals that destroy you. It's the quiet, consistent lies that slip into your life disguised as kindness. They sit beside you at dinner, smile at you from across the table, and tell you they're just helping their sister. And for almost 3 decades, I thought I was married to a good man. We built a life together, small, humble, but full of laughter. We raised 2 children. We planted a garden behind our house, one that still blooms with roses every spring. He'd call me his anchor, his steady hand. And when I finally met her, that woman he'd been sending money to for all those years, she didn't call him brother. No, she called him something else. Something that made my stomach drop, my hands go cold, and my entire body go still. It wasn't anger I felt at that moment. It wasn't even hate. It was disbelief, the kind that scrapes at your soul and whispers, "You've been living a lie." For 27 years, I thought I knew the man who shared my bed, my meals, my dreams. But that day, standing in front of that woman, I realized I didn't know him at all. because the truth she told me, it shattered everything. And even now, when I close my eyes, I can still hear her voice saying that one word, that one forbidden word that changed the meaning of my entire marriage. Tell me something, my dear listener. What would you do if the person you trusted most was living two lives, one with you and one hidden behind a single word, sister? When I look back now, it almost feels like I'm remembering someone else's life, someone who still believed that love, once given, could never break. In those early years, I used to wake up to the sound of the kettle whistling in the kitchen and the faint rustle of a newspaper. That was my husband's morning ritual. He'd sit by the window, sunlight brushing his face, sipping tea as he read the day's headlines aloud to me, pretending to sound outraged at politics and amused by the weather reports. He was always so calm, so dependable, the kind of man people pointed to and said, "Now that's a good husband." And for a long time, I believed them. Our home was small but warm, the kind that always smelled of something baking even when it wasn't. We lived in a quiet neighborhood where people still waved to one another across fences and where every face felt familiar. He used to tell me, home isn't where you live, it's who you live with. And in that simple sentence, I built my world around him. He worked hard, rarely complained, and brought home his pay envelope every month with quiet pride. He'd hand it to me with that half smile and say, "You always manage it better than I do." And I would laugh, teasing him about how he'd forget where his wallet was half the time if I didn't remind him. He'd chuckle, pull me close, and whisper, "That's why I married you, to keep me in line." To anyone looking in from the outside, we were the picture of happiness. Two grown children, a modest home, a few struggles like everyone else, but nothing that couldn't be solved with tea and faith. We weren't rich, but our hearts felt full. You see, that's how trust begins. Not in the grand gestures, but in the ordinary moments. The ones that whisper, "You're safe here." He'd fix things around the house, mend a leaky pipe, repair a broken chair. I used to say, "You're my hero." And he'd grin, tapping his chest, "Every queen needs her knight, right?" And I believed that too. He was gentle with the children, always patient, always listening. I remember once our daughter came home crying because a boy at school had called her names. He sat her down, wiped her tears, and told her, "You never let someone else decide your worth. That's your job." That moment stayed with me for years because it wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. So sure, so kind, so sincere. That's the thing about people who hide secrets well. They make truth look effortless. When he laughed, you believed he was happy. When he said, "I love you," it sounded like a promise carved in stone. Our marriage had its ups and downs like any other. There were arguments about bills, about time, about the usual things that come with two people sharing one life. But even in our worst moments, I never doubted his loyalty. He never raised his voice, never stayed out late, never gave me a reason to question where he'd been. And when he told me about his sister, it seemed so natural, so ordinary. It was some time after our second child was born. I was folding laundry, exhausted and half asleep, when he mentioned, almost casually, that his sister had fallen on hard times. She needed a little help each month. I remember nodding, not even thinking twice. "Of course," I said. "Family helps family." That was it. No suspicion, no questions, just trust. I didn't ask to see her picture. I didn't ask where she lived. It didn't matter. My husband was an honest man, or so I thought. And month after month, Without fail, he'd send a little money, sometimes through the post, sometimes in person. I didn't pry when I asked how she was. He'd smile faintly and say, "She's managing." He made it sound so normal, so unimportant, like a quiet act of kindness he didn't want to boast about. And I admired him for it. It's strange, isn't it? How the very things that make you love someone, their humility, their tenderness, their devotion, can later become the same tools that hide their deceit. Looking back, I can see the patterns I missed, the moments that should have made me pause, like how he never let me come along when he went to visit her. He'd say, "Oh no, dear, it's too far. I'll be back before you know it." Or how he'd get oddly protective of his phone when certain messages came through. But at the time, those moments just blended into the rhythm of everyday life. Because I didn't see them as red flags. I saw them as privacy, as trust. And when you've built your identity around being the good wife, you start believing that blind trust is a virtue. There's a certain pride in saying, "I know my husband. He'd never lie to me." I used to say that often. At family dinners, at church, even to our friends who joked about their husbands' little secrets. I'd laugh and say, "Not my Thomas. He's too honest to hide anything." The irony of that sentence still stings. You know what's cruel about betrayal? It doesn't just destroy your trust in the other person. It shatters your trust in your own perception. Because when the truth finally comes, you start doubting yourself. How could I not have seen it? How did I miss the signs? How could someone so good be capable of something so cruel? But in those years, none of that existed in my mind. In my world, Thomas was still the man who brushed my hair from my face when I cried, the man who brought me wildflowers from the garden tied together with string. He was the man who told bedtime stories to our children, who laughed until tears streamed down his cheeks, who whispered prayers beside me every night. A man who seemed incapable of deceit. There's a specific kind of peace in not knowing the truth, a fragile golden calm that fools you into thinking you're safe. That peace is addictive, and once it's gone, you spend the rest of your life trying to feel it again. Sometimes I think the universe gives us signs, small, subtle cracks in the illusion, just to see if we'll pay attention. And if we don't, those cracks grow. I remember one summer evening, he came home late, looking unusually pale. His shirt was rumpled, his voice quiet. I asked if everything was all right. He said, "Just tired, long day." And then after dinner, I noticed a faint perfume on his collar, not mine. It wasn't floral, it was musky, heavier, something I'd never wear. I remember standing there holding that shirt in my hands, my throat tightening. But then he came into the room, kissed my forehead, and said, "You worry too much, sweetheart." And just like that, I let it go. Because love teaches you to doubt yourself before you doubt them. The next morning, he left early, said he was visiting his sister again. I didn't ask where. I just packed him a sandwich, kissed his cheek, and told him to drive safe. You see, that's what we women do. We build bridges over rivers we're too afraid to look beneath. I spent that whole day cleaning the house, humming to myself, pretending everything was fine. But deep down, a tiny voice whispered that something was shifting. Still, I silenced it, because the truth would have meant losing the illusion I had spent decades nurturing. I didn't realize then that illusions have a cruel habit of turning to dust when you hold them too tightly. For years, we continued like that. Birthdays, anniversaries, holidays with the kids, all the while that secret envelope leaving the house each month, a quiet thread connecting my husband to someone I'd never met. If anyone had told me then that my life would unravel because of that envelope, I would have laughed. I would have said, "Don't be ridiculous. He's helping the family." I even bragged about it once. Can you imagine? At a women's tea gathering, one of the ladies mentioned how selfish her husband was with money, and I smiled proudly, saying, "My husband sends a little every month to his sister. He's generous like that." They admired me, envied me even. But little did I know that generosity was feeding something else entirely. A lie. A relationship I wasn't part of. A secret world where I didn't exist. I think about it often, how quiet deceit can be. How it doesn't shout, doesn't storm. It simply hides behind love and waits. Looking back, I can see how I was living in two stories at once. The story I told the world of love, loyalty, and marriage, and the story he was writing behind my back, one of betrayal, secrecy, and guilt. And maybe that's the saddest part of it all. He didn't even seem unhappy. He still held my hand on walks. I still laughed at my jokes, still said he loved me before bed. But somewhere between those small gestures, another woman's name existed, one he never spoke out loud. If you've ever been betrayed, you know what I mean. That chilling realization that love doesn't always prevent lies. Sometimes it protects them. And I, foolishly, was his perfect protector. I thought we had a perfect marriage. I truly did. But perfection, I've learned, is often just a mask for secrets we're too afraid to face. I used to think routine was a sign of peace, that when life fell into a predictable rhythm, it meant everything was as it should be. And for the longest time, that's exactly what I believed. Every first week of the month, my husband would sit at the kitchen table after dinner with his old leather wallet and a quiet expression. The same wallet he'd had since our wedding day, the one that had grown soft around the edges, just like us. He'd take out a crisp set of bills, count them twice, and place them in a small white envelope. Always the same way, always the same calm. Sometimes he'd hum a tune while sealing it. Sometimes he'd just sigh, almost thoughtfully, before writing her name on the front, Clara, his sister. At first, I didn't even notice the pattern. It was just part of our life, like the ticking of the kitchen clock or the smell of evening tea. But once you start noticing something, you can't unsee it. He never skipped a month, not once. No matter what happened, when money was tight, when bills piled up, when we had emergencies, that envelope always left the house. When our son fell ill and we struggled to pay for his medicine, I suggested maybe we could skip helping his sister just once, just until things got better. He looked at me with those calm brown eyes and said softly, "She needs it more than we do, darling." And that was that. His tone was gentle but final, the kind that told me not to question him further. So I didn't. Because what kind of wife argues with kindness? What kind of wife tells her husband not to help his own sister? I let it go. Again. But little by little, I began noticing more things, like how he never mentioned her beyond that envelope. No birthday calls, no visits during holidays, no photographs. Just money. Every month, like clockwork. And when I asked, casually, "When will I get to meet Clara?" he'd smile faintly and say, "Someday, maybe. She's shy, doesn't like visitors." Shy? I remember laughing. Who's shy about family? He chuckled too, brushing it off with his usual charm. "She's just private. You'd like her, though. She's sweet." Sweet. Private. Shy. Those were the only words I had to build her image on. So, in my mind, I created her. A frail woman, perhaps widowed, living quietly somewhere in the countryside, grateful for her brother's help. I used to imagine her writing thank you notes we never received, maybe even praying for him each night. I convinced myself she existed exactly as he said, because it was easier to believe that than to question the man I loved. Still, sometimes, when I saw him sitting by the table, sealing that envelope with such care, a small chill would run down my spine. It wasn't fear, not yet, just something unexplainable, like standing near a locked door and sensing there's something behind it. But I pushed it away, because love makes you a master at dismissing discomfort. Whenever I felt uneasy, I told myself, "You're overthinking. Don't ruin a good thing with suspicion." He'd often say, "Family isn't about blood, it's about heart." And I thought that was beautiful. Now, I see how it was also a way to blur lines. The first time I noticed something truly strange was one evening when I went to tidy up the study. He'd left a drawer slightly open, and inside were several envelopes, old ones, all addressed the same way. Some opened, some sealed, all with small handwritten notes inside. I wasn't snooping, not really, just straightening up. But when I saw those letters, something in me hesitated. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, feminine. Each one began the same way. "Thank you for your kindness. You always know what I need." And at the bottom of one, in faint ink, were the words that made my heart skip. "I miss you." I froze. It could have been innocent. Maybe she missed her brother. But something about the way it was written didn't feel sisterly. It was intimate, soft, too tender. Still, I put it back, closed the drawer, and pretended I hadn't seen a thing. That night, I lay awake beside him, listening to his breathing. He looked peaceful, unaware of the storm building quietly inside me. For a long time, I told myself it didn't matter, that I trusted him. But trust, once cracked, doesn't heal overnight. It turns into glass, clear, fragile, and sharp. Every little thing after that seemed to cut. He started taking longer drives to deliver the money. Sometimes he'd say the post office was closed and he'd try again tomorrow. Other times he'd come back late, claiming he'd dropped by a friend's house after running the errand. The excuses were never dramatic, just convenient. Once I offered to come with him. I smiled, said I'd love to meet her, finally. He stiffened for just a second, so slight most people wouldn't notice, but I did. Then he laughed it off. "It's a long drive, sweetheart. The roads aren't great. You'd hate it." He kissed my forehead and said, "You trust me, don't you?" That question. So innocent on the surface, yet so loaded. And of course, I said yes. Because how do you say no to someone you've built your life around? Weeks turned into months. Years passed. That envelope became part of the furniture of our lives, ordinary, invisible, yet essential. When I'd balance the household books, I always left space for it. Sister support, I'd label it. A routine expense like electricity or groceries. Even when our finances strained, when we had to cut back on little luxuries, that one line never disappeared. Sometimes I'd joke, "If your sister ever wins the lottery, tell her she owes us a mansion." He'd smile, almost sadly, and reply, "She'd never forget your kindness." There was always something wistful in his tone, like he was speaking about a dream that belonged only to him. I thought it was guilt, maybe survivor's guilt, maybe something from their childhood, so I never pressed. And yet, the older we grew, the heavier the silence around that topic became. It's strange how silence can speak louder than words, how it can grow between two people, invisible but suffocating. There were moments I caught him staring at his phone, lost in thought, times when a faint smile would touch his lips,
the kind of smile that didn't belong to me anymore. And every time I'd ask, "What are you thinking about?" he'd say, "Just work, darling. Don't worry." Don't worry. That became his favorite phrase, and mine, ironically, became, "Of course." Because I'd stopped being a wife who questioned. I'd become a woman holding on to peace at any cost. There was one winter night I'll never forget. The power had gone out, and we sat by candlelight drinking cocoa. He was quiet that evening, unusually distant. I tried to lighten the mood. "Maybe we should visit your sister this Christmas," I said softly. He looked up startled, the flame flickering in his eyes. "She doesn't celebrate much," he said quickly. "Oh, everyone deserves company during the holidays," I insisted, smiling. He forced a laugh. "You're too kind for your own good, you know that." I remember feeling a sting in that moment, not from his words, but from his tone. It was affectionate, yes, but there was a hint of something else, something almost like fear. After that, he became more guarded, kept his envelopes in his briefcase, stopped mentioning her altogether. If I brought it up, he changed the subject, usually with a kiss or a joke. And for a while, that was enough to silence me. Until one evening, years later, when I happened to see him counting money again, only this time it wasn't the first week of the month. "Another transfer?" I asked lightly. He froze for a fraction of a second before smiling. "Yes, she's having a tough month. Hospital bills." Something about the way he said it, too smooth, too rehearsed, made my stomach tighten. But again, I said nothing. I simply nodded, walked away, and told myself not to imagine things. Because deep down, I wasn't afraid of his lies. I was afraid of what they'd mean for me. Admitting something was wrong would have meant my entire marriage, my entire identity was built on an illusion. So I kept setting the table, kept making his tea, kept loving him the way I always had. But at night, when the house was quiet, my thoughts grew louder.
I'd lie awake wondering what kind of sister never called. What kind of family member needed money for decades but never sent a single photo, never visited, never asked about us. Sometimes, in moments of dark humor, I joke with myself, maybe she's imaginary. But my gut told me otherwise. There was someone out there, real, alive, connected to my husband in ways I didn't understand. And somehow, that connection had power over him. Enough power to make him lie, to hide, to protect her from the woman he vowed to be honest with. That was the beginning of the end, though I didn't know it then. Because trust doesn't shatter in an instant. It cracks slowly, month by month, envelope by envelope, each one taking a little more of my peace with it. And even though I tried to silence it, that voice inside me, the one I'd ignored for years, started to whisper louder. Something's not right. You need to know the truth. But the truth, I would soon learn, doesn't knock politely. It breaks the door down when you least expect it. That night, as I cleared the dinner table and watched him slip the latest envelope into his coat pocket, I had no idea how close I was to finding out who Clara really was. And when I finally met her, the word she used for him wasn't brother. It was something else entirely. They say the truth doesn't come all at once. It drips, like a leaking faucet in the middle of the night. You try to ignore it, cover your ears, tell yourself it's nothing, until one day you realize the whole floor is wet. That's exactly how it was with my husband. It didn't begin with anything loud or dramatic. It began with tiny things so ordinary you'd almost feel silly for noticing. The first red flag came on my birthday. For 26 years, he'd never once forgotten. He'd always wake me up with breakfast in bed, even if it was just burnt toast and oversweet tea. He'd always have a small gift wrapped with too much tape because he was terrible at wrapping. But that year,
Nothing. No breakfast, no card, no off-key happy birthday in his deep morning voice. I waited until noon, thinking maybe he was planning something later. When I finally asked, half laughing, "Did you forget what day it is?" He froze. For a brief second, his face went blank, like his mind had been somewhere far away. Then he smiled too quickly. "Of course not. I was saving it for tonight." That evening, he came home with a generic perfume bottle and a box of chocolates that still had the sale tag half torn. I wanted to be touched. I wanted to believe he remembered. But something about his apology, the way his eyes darted away when he handed me the gift, made it clear he hadn't. And it wasn't the forgetting that hurt most. It was realizing that someone else had occupied his thoughts. After that, I started noticing more moments of distance. He'd take his phone into the other room. At first, I thought it was for privacy, work calls perhaps. But one night, as he walked away, I heard something different. His tone changed. Softer, warmer, the kind of voice a man uses when he's trying to be tender. It wasn't what he said, it was what he didn't say. Long pauses, whispered laughter, a gentleness I hadn't heard in a long time. When he came back, I asked, "Who was it?" He hesitated, then said, "Clara. She's going through a tough time."
My heart thudded. Oh, what happened? He shrugged, avoiding my eyes. Just problems. She doesn't like talking about it. And that was it. No details, no concern about my curiosity, just that familiar, firm ending. Don't ask further. But the next day, when I passed by the kitchen, his phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up. It said, C, heart. My breath caught. C, a heart. Now, I'm not a jealous woman by nature. I've always believed in giving space. But a heart next to a sister's name? That wasn't space. That was secrecy. When I looked up at him later, pretending I hadn't seen, I could feel my hands trembling slightly. He must have noticed because he reached out to hold them. "You're quiet today," he said softly. I smiled, just tired. Inside, though, my mind was racing. A sister with a heart, who called late at night and made my husband's voice turn soft. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe C wasn't Clara. Maybe it was a colleague, a friend. But deep down, I knew. That sinking, cold certainty, that's the sound of a heart starting to break before it even has proof. Around that time, he began working late more often. Sometimes he'd come home smelling faintly of unfamiliar perfume. Not strong, but just enough to stir questions I didn't want to ask. When I teased him once, "You're cheating on me with your office paperwork, aren't you?" He smiled and said, "If only you knew how boring it is." That answer might have sounded harmless, even playful. But his eyes told a different story. Tired, distracted, almost guilty. And guilt has a way of making the air heavy, even in silence. Then came the second red flag. Small lies about small things. He'd say he was going to meet a client, but his shirt would have traces of makeup near the collar, faint, barely visible, like a fingerprint of another life. He'd claim he'd stopped for coffee, but the receipts I'd find later said otherwise. Restaurants in parts of town he never mentioned visiting. Still, when I'd ask, he'd have answers ready. "Oh, I met an old friend there. The client preferred that area. I spilled something. That's not makeup." He was too calm, too prepared, like someone who'd practiced honesty just enough to sound believable. And me? I was the audience, applauding the performance, pretending not to notice the cracks in the script. On our anniversary, the pattern deepened. We'd always had dinner together, same restaurant, every year, same table by the window. It was our tradition. But that year, he forgot to book, said the restaurant was full.
So we stayed home, eating leftovers. Halfway through the meal, his phone rang. He stared at the screen for a few seconds before pressing decline. But I caught the name. C. Again. I asked, gently, "Isn't that your sister?" He looked startled, then quickly composed himself. "Yes," he said, smiling faintly. "She's probably just lonely."
I nodded slowly, but my appetite disappeared. He noticed. "You're thinking about something," he said quietly. I forced a laugh. No, I just feel bad for her. She must miss you a lot." He nodded, his jaw tightening. "She does. She's been through a lot." Then he stood up, walked over, and kissed the top of my head. That should have felt reassuring, but instead, it felt like a goodbye in disguise. Over the next few months, the red flags turned into patterns. He guarded his phone like a secret diary. He deleted call logs, changed passwords, and started taking long evening walks. And yet, he was still the same gentle husband, still kind, still affectionate when he wanted to be. That's what made it worse. It wasn't black and white. It was gray, the kind of gray that eats you from the inside because you can't prove it, but you feel it. One evening, I decided to test something. As he got ready for bed, I said casually, "You know, we should visit your sister this month. I can bring some gifts." He froze just for a heartbeat, then smiled. "She's traveling," he said quickly, "out of town for a few weeks." "Where to?" I asked. His answer was instant. "To see a friend." Something in that instant reply told me he was lying. Because truth requires memory, but lies, they rely on reflex. That night, I sat up after he fell asleep, staring at the ceiling. My mind was a battlefield, part of me desperate for answers, another terrified to uncover them. I thought about calling her myself, asking, confronting, but I didn't even know her number. He'd never shared it. So instead, I prayed, not for the truth, but for strength, because I sensed that whatever truth awaited me would hurt more than I was ready for. The final straw, the one that broke through my denial, came on a random Wednesday. He left his phone on the dining table and stepped out to get the mail. It buzzed once, a message preview flashing across the screen. I shouldn't have looked, I know that, but the heart has its own survival instincts. The message read, "I miss your voice. Same time tonight?" No name, just a heart emoji. I felt my chest tighten, like someone had wrapped their hands around it. By the time he came back, the phone was dark again, and my face was calm. I asked nothing. He said nothing. But that silence, that heavy, knowing silence, spoke everything. From that day onward, I began watching him differently. Every smile, every word, every habit became a clue. I noticed how his phone never left his pocket anymore, how he suddenly cared about his appearance again, new cologne, freshly ironed shirts. When I asked if he was seeing someone from work about a project, he nodded too quickly, too eagerly. Yes, that's all it is, business. But business doesn't make a man hum love songs while shaving. It doesn't make him walk outside just to laugh quietly under the stars. And it certainly doesn't make him delete every call history at midnight. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. When he fell asleep, I took his phone from the bedside. My hands were trembling so hard, I almost dropped it. I tried his usual password, our anniversary date. It didn't work. He changed it. That somehow hurt more than any message could.
Because in that small act, he told me everything. That I was no longer meant to see his world, that he had locked me out, not just of his phone, but of his truth. For days, I lived like a ghost, floating through our home, smiling when expected, crying when alone. Every time I saw him write another envelope for his sister, I wondered what words passed between them that money couldn't buy. And every time he hugged me goodnight, I asked myself quietly, is this love or is it habit? Because there's a difference between being loved and being kept. But even as doubt consumed me, something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to break it quietly, not this time. I decided to wait, to watch, and to let him think I was still blind. Because sometimes pretending not to know is the only way to truly see. And I knew, deep down, that the universe had its own timing. That one day, without warning, the truth would step out of the shadows. And when it did, it wouldn't whisper. It would roar. It happened on a Tuesday. Funny how ordinary days often carry extraordinary truths. There was nothing special about it. No argument, no tension. Just the rhythm of an aging marriage moving through another quiet afternoon. He had gone out to run errands, something about paying bills and checking on an old friend's house. I was cleaning the living room, humming to myself, when I noticed his desk drawer slightly open. It wasn't like him to leave things untidy. My husband was meticulous, neat to the point of obsession. Every pen had its place, every paper perfectly aligned. So that small crack in the drawer, that faint invitation, felt like destiny whispering, "Look closer." I stood there for a moment, debating. I wasn't the kind of wife who snooped. In 27 years of marriage, I had respected his space. His desk was his world. Bills, work files, his old Bible, the worn leather wallet he never replaced. But something about that open drawer felt different. It wasn't carelessness. It was a mistake. And mistakes, I've learned, are where truth hides. I walked closer, hesitated, then slowly pulled the drawer open. At first, it looked ordinary. A stack of envelopes, receipts, and a few papers clipped together. But beneath them, half buried, was an envelope with a name written in delicate handwriting. Clara. The name that had haunted my thoughts for months. My breath caught in my throat. I pulled it out carefully, my hands trembling. The envelope was old, slightly creased at the corners as though it had been handled many times. No return address, just one word in the corner. Private. For a moment, I thought of putting it back. What if it wasn't what I feared? What if it was? I stared at the paper, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then I opened it. Inside was a folded letter, the ink slightly smudged, the paper soft from being held. The first line read, "My love, thank you for sending this month's help. You always take care of me, even when you can't be here." The room spun as my eyes clung to the words on the page. My love. I read it again, slower this time, praying I'd misread. But no, it was there, written clearly, tenderly. She hadn't called him brother. She hadn't thanked him like family. She had written to him like a lover. Each line cut deeper than the last. I miss your voice at night. Sometimes I hold your old letter just to feel close again. I wish things were different, but I understand. We must both live the lives we've built. My hand pressed against my chest as if I could hold my heart together. This wasn't sisterly affection. this was intimacy, history, love buried under lies. My husband had been living two lives. That evening, when he came home, I placed the letter back exactly where I'd found it. He kissed my forehead, asked about dinner, smiled like always. I smiled back, because silence, I realized, wasn't ignorance. It was strategy. That night, I lay awake beside him, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, steady, calm, deceitful. Every Clara I'd ever heard echoed in my mind. Every casual mention, every excuse. He wasn't helping a sister. He was sustaining a secret. The next morning, while he showered, I opened the drawer again. Beneath the first letter were 5 more, each dated years apart. Her handwriting ever changed, tender, loving, constant. Thank you for keeping your promise. I know you have your life there, but mine still feels empty without you. This wasn't new. This had been going on for years, maybe even before me. I started to pay attention. Every first week of the month, he'd leave with a sealed envelope and an excuse, paying a bill, helping my sister. Always the same pattern, but when I checked our shared bank account, one name repeated each month. C. Hartley. Now I had her last name, Clara Hartley, the woman behind the lie. The pieces began to connect. The softened tone when he spoke of her, the distracted looks, the emotional distance. He hadn't been hiding an affair in the shadows. He'd built it into his daily life, disguised as kindness. Then I found something I hadn't seen before, a jewelry receipt tucked beneath a notebook. The date, December 22. The item, a gold heart-shaped pendant engraved, "Always yours." He had never given me such a gift. That night, I smiled through dinner, pretended nothing had changed. But inside, I was no longer the trusting wife he thought I was. I was the woman preparing for truth. A few days later, I found a small folded paper in his shirt pocket, an address, no name, just a street I recognized in a nearby town, the same one he mentioned during his sister visits. I copied it down. I finally had a direction, a path toward the truth. And the next time he'd say, "I'm just sending something to my sister," I'd be ready. Because now I knew exactly what to ask. Then why does she call me my love? That morning is carved into my memory, sharp, still, unforgettable. The world seemed to pause, as if it knew truth was about to shatter everything I'd believed. For weeks, I had lived in quiet torment, haunted by one question: who was she really? For 27 years, I had built my world around Adil, my husband, my anchor. But lately, every smile felt rehearsed, every word hollow. I couldn't ignore the unease any longer. The address I'd found in his drawer, a small apartment 2 towns away, burned in my pocket like a secret demanding to be seen. The bus ride felt endless. Every passing tree reminded me of our life, our wedding, our laughter, his gentle excuses, just helping my sister. But something deep inside whispered, "Not this time." When I reached the building, my legs trembled. The name on the plate read, Sarah Khalid. I almost turned away. But truth has a strange pull. It hurts, yet it refuses to let you hide. She opened the door, a woman in her 40s, soft eyes, polite smile. "Yes? I'm a friend of Adil's. His sister?" A flicker crossed her face. Confusion, fear, something unspoken. Then she let me in. The apartment smelled of jasmine and tea. On the wall hung photos, flowers, landscapes, and one of him, Adil, laughing, comfortable, hers.
When she asked, "So, you know a deal?" I answered quietly, "Yes, I'm his wife." The room froze. She stared, then whispered, "His wife?" The word cracked the air open. She looked devastated. "I thought you knew," she said, voice trembling. "Adil and we've been together for years. He told me you were separated." My hands went numb. "Separated?" I managed. "We live together. Every month he sends you money. He says it's for his sister." Her eyes widened. "Sister? He told me you were his cousin." The world tilted. Every trip, every late night, every work visit, they all matched her stories. She showed me pictures, them on holidays, her wearing my lost necklace. Each image was another dagger. "How could he live two lives?" I whispered. "Because," she said softly, "he made us both believe we were his only truth." We sat in silence, two women, both betrayed, both broken by the same man's lies. When I stood to leave, she reached for my hand. "I didn't know." "I believe you," I said. "We were both lied to." Outside, the sun was too bright, too cruel. The world looked unchanged, but mine was gone. Every smile, every touch of the past 27 years was now stained with deceit. That night, when Adil came home, his eyes were calm, his voice light. "You're quiet tonight," he said. I smiled faintly. "Nothing's wrong." Because I knew, before the storm, I needed to understand the entire lie. Betrayal, I realized, isn't just what someone hides. It's the silence they build and call it love. And I knew the next time I faced him, I wouldn't be the same woman again. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the empty space where my husband usually slept. His scent still lingered, once comforting, now tainted. Betrayal doesn't shout, it whispers. It seeps quietly into your bones until even silence feels heavy. When Adil came home, everything looked normal. His smile, his calm voice, the gentle kiss on my forehead. But I saw him differently now, like a stranger wearing my husband's skin. "Do you love me?" I asked softly. He laughed. "What kind of question is that after all these years?" I smiled faintly, but inside I was breaking. Because love without truth is only performance, and he was an excellent actor. That night, he slept peacefully while I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our life together. Birthdays, anniversaries, late-night talks, all of it suddenly felt staged. I remembered the phone always placed face down, the business trips, and the late calls he took outside. Things I once ignored now screamed for attention. By morning, my heart felt heavy as stone. When he left for work, I finally collapsed. The tears came in violent waves, raw, unstoppable. I gripped the bed sheets, gasping for air as every memory tore through me like glass. I wandered through the house, touching photos, letters, the "Forever Yours" card he'd written just 2 months earlier. In the kitchen, I found his favorite mug, "Best Husband," in faded gold. My hands trembled. Then, without thinking, I threw it against the wall. It shattered, and with it, something inside me did too. Days passed in silence. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. He still smiled, still kissed my forehead as if nothing had changed. But every time he did, I wanted to scream, "Who are you?" Instead, I wrote. Each night, I filled a notebook with thoughts I couldn't say aloud. Day 1. He still calls her every Tuesday. Day 3. He looks peaceful. I hate that he gets to look peaceful. Day 5. How long can a woman live pretending she doesn't know the truth?
Writing became my anchor because betrayal isolates you. It makes you question your worth, your sanity. But eventually, I saw the truth. His deceit said nothing about me. It only revealed his weakness. One evening, I caught our reflection in the microwave. Him scrolling his phone, me holding a knife, blank and distant. We looked like strangers trapped in the same frame. That night, as he slept, I whispered to the darkness, "One day, Adil, you'll realize you never really knew me either." Because I wasn't the same woman anymore. The pain that broke me had also remade me, sharper, steadier, stronger. I no longer lived in the world he built with lies. He thought I was silent out of ignorance, but my silence was power, the calm before truth. And as I turned off the light, I knew the woman who once lived for his love was gone. The one who remained would live for her own truth.
The morning I decided to confront Adil, the world felt eerily still, as if even the wind was waiting for what would happen next. I wasn't driven by rage anymore, but by exhaustion. I was done pretending, done being the dutiful wife in a story written by someone else. He came into the kitchen humming softly, kissed my cheek, and smiled like everything was normal. But that morning, I saw him for what he truly was, a man wrapped in lies. "Sit down, Adil," I said quietly. My calm tone made him obey without question. I slid an envelope across the table, the one I'd found in his drawer, filled with receipts, transfers, and the love note from her. His eyes flickered. "Where did you get this?" "Tell me who she is," I demanded. "She's my sister," he stammered. I leaned forward. "Then why did your sister call you my love when I met her?" His face went pale. Silence stretched between us until he muttered, "It's complicated." I laughed bitterly. "Complicated? You lied for years, sent her money, called her family. How long were you planning to keep this up? Until I died?" He rubbed his face, whispering, "You don't understand. She needed me." "Needed you?" I snapped. "You mean the woman you promised before me? The one you built a secret life with?" Tears filled my eyes, but my voice stayed steady. "I defended you to everyone. I called my silence love when it was really blindness." He finally admitted it. There had been another woman before me. They'd reconnected years later. She was struggling and he'd helped her. But what began as guilt turned into something else. Then he said the words that shattered me. "She had a son, his son." I didn't scream. I didn't move. I just felt the air leave my lungs. 27 years of marriage and another life running parallel to mine. The sister was his past, his affair, his secret family. He cried, saying he never meant to hurt me. I whispered, "No, you just meant to deceive me gently." In the days that followed, I lived like a ghost. Every smile, every memory, every picture became a lie I could finally see through. He begged for forgiveness, promised to fix things, but trust doesn't survive deceit. It only disguises the cracks. I began walking every morning, breathing again. Pain slowly turned into clarity. One day, I told him, "I'm not angry anymore, but I can't love someone I don't trust." I moved out soon after. My new home was small, quiet, sunlit, and mine. Healing came softly through solitude, through rediscovering who I was before him. Because
Betrayal doesn't just break you, it rebuilds you. He took my peace, but in doing so, gave me freedom. And now when people ask if I'd ever trust again, I say, yes, but never blindly. Because sometimes betrayal isn't the end. It's the beginning of who you were always meant to be.
You know, when I look back now, it doesn't feel like just a story. It feels like a mirror, one that reflects how fragile love becomes when it's built on silence and half-truths. There was a time I thought peace meant keeping quiet, that loyalty meant enduring pain without question. But I've learned something. Silence isn't peace. It's the sound of secrets waiting to be heard. I still remember that moment. Trembling hands, disbelief, the voice of another woman calling my husband something I never expected to hear. That single word tore through decades of illusion. But in losing everything false, I found something real, myself. Because when the lies fall away, what remains is strength. Maybe your story isn't mine. Maybe your betrayal came from a friend, a child, a lover. But the ache, the sleepless nights, the way you start doubting your worth, that's universal. And I want you to know this. You are not foolish for trusting. You are not weak for loving deeply. You are not broken for believing someone's promises. You were simply human, capable of hope, compassion, and faith. Those are not flaws. They are proof that you have a heart brave enough to feel. Do you know what's harder than walking away from someone who lied to you? It's walking forward without losing the kindness that made you love in the first place. That's the real victory. There were nights I thought I'd never heal. But pain has a strange honesty. It reveals truths that comfort hides. One morning, I realized the hurt no longer defined me. It had shaped me, yes, but it didn't own me anymore. That's when I stopped asking, why did he do this to me? And started asking, what can I learn from this? That small shift from victim to survivor changed everything. And if you've ever loved someone who betrayed you, please remember, you are not alone. There are countless hearts like yours, healing quietly, finding themselves again one breath at a time. That's why I started Grandma's Silent Truths, not to tell tales of pain, but to remind you that even heartbreak can be a teacher. Even endings can lead to beginnings. I don't hate the woman he called his sister. In a strange way, I thank her. Because she became the mirror that showed me what I was too afraid to see. Her truth broke me, but it also freed me. Freedom doesn't always come with happiness. Sometimes it comes with pain, but peace follows close behind, the kind that comes from finally facing the truth. So, tonight, if my story has reached your heart, pause. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, what truth have I been too afraid to face? Because truth waits. It waits through silence, through fear, until one day it demands to be heard. And when it is, life changes forever. Never let anyone convince you that love means blindness. Real love isn't about ignoring the truth. It's about seeing clearly and choosing anyway. And when the truth hurts, remember, that's when you're growing. That's when you're finally free. So until next time, my dear ones, silence doesn't mean peace. It's only the sound of secrets waiting to be heard. And when you find the courage to break that silence, you don't just uncover the truth, you uncover yourself.